The Egyptians began to reckon their months from the time when the sun enters, now in the beginning of the sign of Aries. Afterwards, in consequence of the precession of the equinoxes, the summer equinox took place in the sign of Aries. Hence, part of the Egyptians transferred their worship from the bull or calf to the ram. Herodotus says that the statue of Jupiter, Ammon, had the head of a ram. Eusebius tells us that the idol Ammon had a ram's head with the horns of a goat, while others continued to worship the bull. Strabo informs us that in his time, the Egyptians nowhere sacrificed sheep, but in the Nilotic Nome. We may explain this in the language of our modern astronomers by saying that some of the learned Egyptians continue to reckon by the movable zodiac, while others reckon the year by the fixed zodiac. And this circumstance produced a division of sex in the people, as it was a division of opinion amongst the learned. Likewise, by the same precession of the equinoxes, the sun passed from Aries to Pisces in the vernal equinox about 338 years before our era. Yet the beginning of the year continued to be reckoned from Aries. If the Egyptian astronomy and Egyptian religion had then existed with the same vigor, both would have perhaps suffered a similar alteration, but the Egyptian systems were at that period nearly annihilated. We may observe, however, that the Christians at the beginning of our era marked their tombs with fishes as an emblem of Christianity, to distinguish their sepulchres from those of the heathens by a symbol unknown to them. Returning from this short digression to our immediate purpose, we have to observe that if those ceremonies and symbols were meant to represent the sun and the laws of its motions, these very phenomena of nature were studied with a moral view, as being themselves types of arguments to a more sublime or metaphysical philosophy, and the moral rules therefrom deducted were impressed on the memory by those lively images and representations. The emerging of the sun into the lower hemisphere and its returning was contemplated either as a proof or as a symbol of the immortality of the soul. One of the most important as well as the most sublime tenets of the Platonic philosophy. Also, Pindar, speaking of the Eleusinian mysteries, deducts this inference. Blessed is he who, having seen the common things under the earth, also knows what is the end of life, for he knows the empire of Jupiter. Since in Phaedo he venerates with a becoming silence the assertion delivered in the arcane discourses that men are placed in the body as in a certain prison secured by a guard, and testifies according to the mystic ceremonies the different allotments of pure and impure souls in Hades, their habits, and the triple path arising from their essences, and thus, according to paternal and sacred institutions, all which are full of symbolical theory and of the poetical descriptions concerning the ascent and descent of souls of Dionysiel, assigns the punishment of the Titans, the trivia and wanderings in Hades, and everything of the same kind. The doctrines of the spirituality and immortality of the soul explained by those symbols were very little understood even by the initiated. Thus we find some of them took those types to signify merely the present body by their descriptions of the infernal abodes, whereas the true meaning of these mysteries inculcated the doctrine of a future state of the soul and future rewards and punishments. And that such were the doctrines of those philosophers is shown by many. And indisputable authorities. The union of the soul with the body was considered as the death of the soul, its separation as the resurrection of the soul, and such ceremonies and types were intended to impress the doctrine of the immersion of the soul into matter as is well attested. The ancient theologists also testify that the soul is in the body as it were in a sepulchre to suffer punishment. When the soul has descended into generation, she participates of evil and profoundly rushes into the region of dissimilitude, to be entirely merged in nothing more than into dark mire. Again, the soul therefore dies through vice, as much as it is possible for the soul to die, and the death of the soul is, while merged or baptized, as it were, in the present body, to descend into matter and be filled with its impurity, and after departing from this body to lie absorbed in its filth, till it returns to a superior condition, and elevates its eye from the overwhelming mire. For to heap plunged in matter is to descend into the Hades, and there fall asleep. Oh, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death?